Hi everyone, Master P here from the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We are going to be talking about how to approach the multiple choice questions on the AP Language and Composition exam. So to begin, it seems fitting that we answer a multiple choice question. In order to pass your AP exams, you should do all of the following except take practice multiple choice quizzes, be attentive and participate in class, do your classwork and homework, meet regularly with a study group, or rely on your lucky t-shirt? I think the answer there is pretty obvious. Relying on your lucky t-shirt may not be enough to help you be successful on the multiple choice section of this exam. So let's talk about what will help you. First of all, to give you an idea of what you're going to be up against. The multiple choice section is the first section of the exam that you will take. The exam is divided into two sections, multiple choice and the essay portion. So the essay portion is the second half. The multiple choice portion of the exam counts as 45% of your overall score, which means that your essays constitute the remaining 55%. You are given 60 minutes, 1 hour, to complete the multiple choice section. The number of questions varies from year to year. It can range anywhere from 45 questions to 55 questions, and the number of questions correlates with the length of the passages that you're given. You will have somewhere between 4 to 5 short passages. Some of them may be very short, some of them are a bit longer, but somewhere between 4 and 5 passages to read and answer questions for. You'll have 5 answer options: A, B, C, D, and E. Scoring, the way that the exam is scored is that you earn points for the questions you answer correctly, but you do not receive a penalty for incorrect answers. That used to be the case a long time ago. That is not the case anymore. So that should tell you right away there is nothing to be lost by guessing if you absolutely don't know an answer, if you're running out of time. There is no penalty for those incorrect answers. When you're looking at a multiple choice question, every question consists of the same elements. The first element is the stem, and that's the question itself. So in this example, the phrase, "a verbal life on the lips of the living," from paragraph 1, suggests that. Okay, so that's the stem of your question. Then you have your answer choices, A through E. The answer that is correct is called the key, and the answer choices which are incorrect are called distractors. Now, why is it important for you to know this? The main reason is so that you feel comfortable with the format of these questions and to recognize that any answer which is not the correct answer is meant to distract you. So that's something to keep in mind. So what kinds of questions are you going to face on the exam? Well, we can put these questions into 4 main types. Of course, these questions, you'll come across questions that blend between 2 of these categories, but these are the main categories, the main types of questions you'll run into on the exam. The first one is vocab and context. The second, comprehension, where you're answering questions about the entire passage. The third is comprehension, where you're answering questions about a specific moment in the passage. And the fourth is rhetorical analysis of stylistic devices. So let's take a look at each one of these types of questions in more detail. For vocab and context, these types of questions are testing your understanding of specific word definitions with an emphasis on context. This is not a vocabulary test, of course, although it certainly helps. The more you read, the larger your vocabulary, the easier these questions are, but you should be able to figure out the vocabulary, the answer to these kinds of questions based on their context. So these questions are going to ask you to infer connotation, associated meanings, or more specific denotations. What does it actually mean? And with that kind of question, it may be a word that has multiple meanings, and they are asking you to identify the meaning being used in that particular context. Here are some examples. So the first one in line 2, Clumsiness refers to the confusion. Oh, sorry. And then you don't need me to read all the answer choices. When you have these questions, you're going to see that they tell you a line reference. They'll put the word in quotation marks, and typically you will see a word like refers, or down here, here's our line number, our specific word, and then to mean. So you'll see that phrasing repeated. One alternative to the use of quotation marks around a particular word would be the use of italics to identify a word they're asking. And you can see again, we have to mean in this case. What can help you here with these vocab and context questions, when they tell you the line number, if you are running out of time, you can answer these questions more quickly than a question such as this one where it asks you throughout the passage. So if you find that you are getting to the end of your time, look for the types of questions that refer you to a specific line, because that's where you're going to find the answer. So keep that in mind. Okay. The second kind of question is the comprehension question, where you're looking at ideas expressed throughout the entire passage. So it could be a main idea. They could ask you about the argument presented or the purpose of the passage as a whole. When you're thinking about your answers for those questions, of course, you want to keep in mind the rest of the rhetorical situation, the other elements in the rhetorical situation: speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, and subject. Here's a question, an example that shows you when they're asking about the main idea of the entire passage. The passage focuses primarily on the, right? So again, it's directing you to the whole passage, and it's asking you the primary focus, which is another way of saying main idea. Here are some more examples. In these examples, the question is asking about how the passage is developed and organized. So the author develops the passage primarily through. So the question is getting at the strategy used to develop the passage. In this other example, the organization of the passage can best be described as. And notice here in this question how you have these two words, and in some, well, this one is a little bit different, but you've got this adjective, right? It's not just narrative, but the option is personal narrative. It's not just data, but it's empirical data, not just explanation, but non-judgmental explanation, not just analysis, but descriptive analysis. Always pay attention to those adjectives, because test makers will try to trip you up with, if you recognize, for example, that you're reading something that is analysis, that could be included in one of the distractors, but perhaps it's not descriptive analysis, right? Or it's an explanation, but it's not non-judgmental. So make sure you pay attention to those adjectives. Here's a question about how the passage is developed and organized. So it's both of those ideas. And it's asking, what is the relationship between the two paragraphs in the passage? Okay. Now you can you notice a pattern where each answer choice, each distractor, and the key begins the same way. So that can help you. And for these types of questions, what may help you as well is to look at the two parts. So the first paragraph describes the strengths. Now, if you know that the first paragraph does not actually describe the strengths of the writer, that answer is wrong, and you can eliminate it. Alternately, if you read it and you say, okay, the first paragraph surveys various types of writers, that's right, and the second focuses on Carlyle, if it doesn't, then that means that question is wrong. So in these types of they're not quite two-part, but in a way they are, both parts of the answer need to satisfy the question. So keep that in mind as well. Sometimes the questions will focus or be connected to style. So in this example, it says the passage most directly resembles the speaker's sense of Parker's style in its, and then we get at some of the strategies. The questions could ask about the author or speaker's persona, attitude, position, etc. Now again, the author is best described as a curious individual, a serious scientist, an excited eyewitness, a confused novice, an ironic interpreter. So again, not just, we don't have just the role, but also an adjective describing that role. So pay attention to those choices. The answer, here's another example where it's about the author or the author's attitude, position, etc. The speaker associates children with the literature of power because they both. Okay, so that's a question you would be able to answer after you've read the entire passage and understand it. Could ask about audience. Which of the following best represents the author's intended audience? So is it individuals, readers, writers, instructors, scholars? Other questions might make you or ask you to make an inference based on your reading of the passage. Which of the following statements is best supported by information given in the passage? And then we come to comprehension questions, which are specific in nature. So you'll see some similarities with the wording that we were just looking at, but these questions are more specific to a particular moment. And here you can see one of the ways you can tell the difference is because they direct you to a particular line or lines, right? The last three sentences in paragraph 1, the phrase in line 1, and then you have the answer choices. Again, these are nice because you know where to find the answer. They're telling you where to find the answer. These questions can focus on purpose or function of specific parts of the passage. So although it may not look like it's a specific reference because there's no number, it is in a way because it's referring you to the first paragraph or the opening sentence or the first 4 sentences of paragraph 6. And notice how they're asking purpose, serves to, which is another way of getting at purpose or function, the function, right? These types of questions ask about shifts in focus at a particular point in the passage, or they can ask you to infer things about the author. The last type of question deals with the rhetorical analysis of style. And these questions are asking about those devices like diction, imagery, figurative language, and so on. It's not an identification exam. It's going beyond, can you point out a metaphor? These questions are going to be asking you, so what, right? How do these devices help the author achieve his or her purpose? So let's look at some examples. Compared with that of the rest of the passage, the diction of the final lines in paragraph 6 is, and they're asking you to describe the word choice in that moment. Which of the following best describes the images in the last sentence of the passage? So they're asking you, again, how would you describe the images? Up here it was how would you describe the word choice? The tone of the fourth paragraph can best be described as. The arrow in paragraph 3 is a metaphorical reference to. So, again, getting at what is being done here, not which one is a metaphor, but how is the metaphor being used. So here are some strategies you can apply. You know the types of questions now, or you have a better sense of the different types of questions. But there are strategies to taking these kinds of tests, and you want to be in the right mindset. Remember, you don't need to answer every question correctly. You can actually pass the exam by answering 60 to 70% of the questions correctly and writing solid essays. So what that means is you shouldn't panic if you feel like you're missing a lot of the multiple choice questions. First of all, you don't know that for sure. And second of all, you don't need a 100% on the multiple choice section in order to pass this exam. So if you're starting to worry, try and make yourself feel more confident in the fact that you're doing your very best and you're going to answer every single question to the best of your ability, and you're going to stay in the game and focus on answering each one to the best of your abilities. Before you read the options, one of the strategies you can employ is to think of your own answer. As I mentioned before, you have the key, which is the correct answer, and then you have distractors. Those distractors are meant to distract you. So if you can read the question and in your mind formulate the answer, then you know what to look for when you're looking at those answer choices. Last but not least, you're going to try these strategies as well. You're going to want to use the number of passages to guide your timing. For example, if you know there are 4 passages in this section, then you know that 30 minutes into the exam, you should be moving on from the second to the third passage. Also consider the difficulty of the passages. You don't have to answer these questions in the order in which they appear. So if the very first passage is some kind of letter written in the 1800s, you don't have to answer those questions first. You can skip that passage, skip those questions, move on to the second one, and then come back at the end to that letter. Definitely, though, if you skip a passage and the questions, that doesn't mean you should move on from a passage before you answer all the questions. So you want to make sure that if there are 7 questions related to a passage, answer all of those before you move on. Even if you circle in your passage, in your test booklet, that you want to revisit a question you're not sure about, go ahead and answer it, and then you can always come back to it if you have time. Keep in mind that questions with that word except often take the longest to answer, so use that as part of your timing strategy. Make sure that you eliminate options actively. So what that means is you've got your pen in hand, and when you know something is not correct, you mark through it and take it off the table. As I said before, you can circle questions that you know you need to come back and answer later. Maybe you bubble in the answer, but if you're really unsure about it, you could put that question mark, come back to it if you have time. Or you could star questions that you know you need to come back to if you've got more time. So that's it. Those are our strategies. There's no foolproof way to prepare for this APA multiple choice section except to work hard throughout the school year and to go into this exam with the most positive mindset you can. And on that note, we say, fare thee well, young scholars.